Picture the sweltering desert heat.
Yeah.
The pulsing bass line is, vibrating through the very ground you're standing on.
Oh, yeah, you can feel it in your chest.
Exactly. The flash of cameras in the distance, you're surrounded by the most famous faces on the planet. And a seemingly innocent cup of juice is passed through the crowd right into your hands.
Just a normal party moment.
Right. So you take a sip, and then suddenly, this terrifying spiral begins. The room tilts, the faces around you distort, you are losing complete control in a room full of people, and you have absolutely no idea why.
That is just a nightmare.
It really is. The cameras keep flashing, the crowd freezes in your warped vision, and just like that, a private nightmare threatens to become Hollywood's newest obsession.
Wow.
Khloe Kardashian was drugged. Here's everything we know. Welcome to Starscope Report. Join Jordan and Jamie as they uncover Hollywood drama, music industry shakeups, and viral influencer scandals. From red carpet surprises to social media controversies, we dive deep into the stories behind the fame.
It is incredibly unsettling. I mean, when you strip away the glamour of a desert music festival and realize what is actually happening in that scenario, your brain expects a refreshing drink, and instead, it literally gets hijacked.
Yeah, and we are unpacking a massive stack of reporting for this deep dive today. We're looking through recent coverage from E! News, the Daily Mail, and Your Tango, alongside this deeply vulnerable revelation Khloe Kardashian just made on her Khloé in Wonderland podcast.
It was a really intense listen.
So intense. We're going to look at that terrifying Coachella experience, trace how it emotionally connects to her infamous brushes with the law, and ultimately examine the billion-dollar, highly militarized security apparatus this family has built.
Because when you look at these events chronologically, rather than just, as isolated tabloid moments, a fascinating psychological portrait emerges for you. This is fundamentally a story about the absolute dread of vulnerability.
Right.
And what happens when the illusion of a protective bubble suddenly bursts.
Let's start with that desert nightmare. So on her podcast, Khloe reflected on her very first, and actually her only, trip to the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival. She estimated this happened, quote, many moons ago, around 2016.
Which is wild that she never went back.
Yeah, but what's striking is the timing of her sharing this. She brought it up right after the 2026 Coachella Festival wrapped. She was talking to Kris Jenner and admitted she actually had serious FOMO, like fear of missing out, about skipping the 2026 event.
I mean, that reaction feels deeply human to me. You see your family experiencing something culturally massive, and you just want to be part of it.
Well, the 2026 festival happened to fall on her daughter True's birthday weekend, which is why she stayed back. But literally everyone else was there. Justin Bieber was performing, and Kim, Courtney, Kendall, and Kylie were all in attendance.
So she's just watching the whole thing on Instagram?
Exactly. She's sitting at home, watching her sisters online, feeling like she's missing this incredible cultural moment. But that longing to be there is entirely at odds with the sheer terror she actually lived through the only time she went.
It's crazy how the human brain is so good at compartmentalizing trauma. It highlights the positive social aspects of an event, the outfits and the music, while dampening the terrifying memories. But looking at the reality of 2016, it paints a very different picture.
Right, so let's cut back to 2016. Khloe is at an exclusive off-site desert party. A drink is circulating among the VIP guests. She's casually drinking what looks like regular fruit juice. Now, she was very explicit on the podcast about her interpretation of this event.
What did she say?
She stated, "I don't think anyone drugged me. I just think I was the dumb one and didn't realize that everyone was on drugs."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she unknowingly consumed it, thinking it was just a harmless beverage.
I want to pause on the mechanics of that moment because the unknowing part is what makes this a literal psychological nightmare.
Because she wasn't expecting it.
Exactly. When someone takes a substance recreationally, their brain anticipates the chemical shift. The nervous system prepares for that dopamine or serotonin influx. But when you are drugged unknowingly, there's this massive predictive error in the brain.
It's a complete shock to the system.
Yeah, your cognitive baseline is violently altered without your consent, and your mind desperately tries to find an anchor. You don't just feel high, you feel like you're losing your grip on reality.
And she described it exactly like that. She remembered drinking it and suddenly feeling, quote, really crazy. As the disorientation worsened, the panic set in. She fled the party and locked herself in a bathroom for hours.
Just sitting in there alone.
Yes. Picture that contrast. Outside the door, it's a VIP Coachella party. People are literally yelling at her to come out and join the fun. Inside the bathroom, she's trapped, hiding, terrified, and totally alone in this altered state.
The bathroom basically becomes the only space where she retains a shred of autonomy. I mean, for someone whose entire life, brand, and public image require such meticulous curation, publicly losing control of your motor functions is the ultimate threat.
It's a PR disaster waiting to happen.
Right. It's not just about the biological effects of the substance, it is the absolute terror of public exposure.
But I struggle to understand how someone with a massive security payroll ends up drinking mystery juice in the first place. I mean, where were her handlers?
You would think they'd be right there.
Yeah, if you are a billionaire reality star, doesn't your team vet what is handed to you? This entire situation seems to completely shatter the illusion of the celebrity protective bubble.
It reveals a huge vulnerability in how these offsite events are structured. Even with personal security, a desert party is fundamentally designed to erode boundaries. The environment is curated to feel informal and, spontaneous.
Yeah, dark lighting, loud music.
Exactly. The social expectation is that you participate in the collective looseness. Security might be watching the perimeter for physical threats or paparazzi, but they generally aren't inspecting a plastic cup passed by another A-lister. When the threat comes from inside the VIP tent, the bubble is basically useless.
And when that bubble pops, the isolation is absolute. And honestly, that's not even the wildest part of her history with feeling completely out of control.
It gets worse.
Oh, it does. Later in this deep dive, we'll talk about the shocking twist nobody saw coming regarding her time behind bars. If you are loving these Hollywood twists, make sure you're subscribed. We've got even crazier stories ahead.
So the sheer panic of being physically trapped in a small bathroom, waiting for a terrifying experience to end, it actually shares a striking psychological resonance with another deeply isolating event in her life.
Oh, you mean the arrest?
Yeah, it mirrors the profound loss of autonomy she experienced during her infamous 2007 DUI arrest.
The thematic through line there is just undeniable. In March 2007, a 22-year-old Khloe Kardashian was arrested in Los Angeles for driving under the influence.
Such a massive pop culture moment.
It really was. And looking back on her podcast, she was incredibly candid about her own naivete at the time. She had no concept that a first offense DUI would lead to actual incarceration. Her primary, overwhelming thought the moment she was pulled over was simply, I can't let my mom find out.
Which is a remarkably sheltered response to a serious criminal charge.
Very much so.
It speaks to a life where problems are usually solved by public relations teams or, family intervention rather than the criminal justice system.
Well, the reality of that justice system hit her incredibly hard. Because her arrest happened on the weekend, the administrative bureaucracy of the Los Angeles County Jail couldn't process her release until Monday morning. She was completely stuck.
Just trapped in the system.
Yeah. A 22-year-old Calabasas socialite wearing a micro dress that she felt made her look, quote, questionable in that environment, placed in a crowded holding cell with 23 other women, many of whom were alleged prostitutes. She spent the entire weekend in that cell.
The sensory shock of that environment just cannot be overstated. You are moving from a highly insulated, perfectly curated reality into a concrete room where you have zilly control. None over the lighting, the noise, the company, or your own schedule.
And the physical toll it took on her is fascinating. She was so paralyzed by fear and the sheer surrealness of the situation that she didn't use the restroom a single time the entire weekend.
Wow, not once?
Not once. She reflected on the podcast that the fact she could even do that still fascinates her.
That is a direct physiological mechanism of the human body under extreme duress. When your brain perceives a persistent high-level threat, the sympathetic nervous system triggers a prolonged fight-or-flight response.
Right, so the body just shuts down.
Literally. Your body redirects energy away from non-essential functions like digestion and excretion, funneling it towards survival mechanisms. The fact that her body shut down to that extreme degree tells us exactly how traumatized her nervous system was in that holding cell.
And the saga didn't end that weekend either. Fast forward to July 2008. She was ordered to surrender to serve a 30-day jail sentence for violating the probation connected to that initial DUI.
30 days is a long time.
She was terrified. She said the anticipation of serving 30 days was actually much scarier than the initial sudden arrest. But because of severe overcrowding in the Linwood, California jail facility, she ended up serving just a few hours before being granted an early release.
The emotional whiplash of that sequence is so intense. You spend weeks building up the psychological armor to endure a month of incarceration, confronting that absolute loss of freedom, and then you are abruptly pushed back out into your glamorous life before the sun sets.
Yeah, and the way she prepared for that surrender is a perfect snapshot of celebrity coping mechanisms. Knowing her mugshot was going to be taken and likely published everywhere, her best friend, Malika Hack, actually styled her hair for the photo right before she went in.
Oh, of course she did.
They laughed about it recently, noting that Malika did a really good job. But I have to ask, I mean, is making sure your blowout looks perfect for a county jail mugshot a sign of genuine naivete? Or is it the ultimate symptom of privilege? It feels like treating the justice system as just another photo op.
It is a really complex defense mechanism. When you're facing a situation where your autonomy is going to be completely stripped away, you cling to the elements you can still dictate.
Right. Control what you can control.
Exactly. Styling her hair was an attempt to exert a tiny fraction of control over her own narrative. By bringing a piece of her curated world into the jail, she was trying to protect her identity from being completely absorbed by the institutional setting. But you are absolutely right that it requires an immense level of privilege to even have the mental bandwidth to worry about hair volume while facing a 30-day sentence.
We've seen how incredibly vulnerable this lack of control makes them, but you will not believe the extreme multi-million-dollar lengths this family goes to now to ensure a breakdown of the perimeter never happens again. Stay tuned and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what is coming next.
So the vulnerability we discussed at Coachella and in the Los Angeles County Jail fundamentally altered their approach to the world. They realized that the soft, invisible bubble of fame was totally permeable.
Right, it wasn't enough anymore.
No, it could be breached by a spiked drink, a bad decision, or a police officer. So they decided to replace the invisible bubble with a very visible, highly militarized bunker.
And the economics required to maintain that bunker are absolutely staggering. Based on the reporting, Kylie Jenner spends up to $400,000 a month just on personal security.
That number is almost impossible to process.
It is. To give you some industry perspective, security experts note that a typical high-level A-list celebrity might spend $75,000 to $100,000 a month. Kylie is spending up to 4 times that baseline.
When you scale up to $500,000 every 30 days, you are no longer just paying for bodyguards. You are funding a private intelligence agency.
Let's break down what that $400,000 actually buys. This isn't just a guy in a suit walking behind you. This covers 2,047 overlapping coverage shifts. It funds advanced teams who sweep locations before she even arrives.
Like the Secret Service.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
It pays for specialized drivers trained in evasive maneuvers, dedicated security escorts for every family member, personnel permanently stationed at all property perimeters, and cyber teams monitoring closed-circuit feeds and social media for potential threat escalation. It is a massive, highly coordinated tactical payroll.
It fundamentally rewrites how you interact with the physical world. You don't just run to a coffee shop. Your movement is treated as a logistical operation. The route is planned, the exits are mapped, and the individuals in the coffee shop are subtly surveilled.
And the hardware required for these operations is just as extreme as the personnel. After Northwest was born, Kanye West purchased 2 Iron Diamond armored vehicles from the Latvian manufacturer Darts Motors. These vehicles cost $1.2 million each.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were directly inspired by the Limo 1 design used by former U.S. presidents.
I think we need to explain what a $1.2 million armored vehicle actually is, because calling it an SUV just does not capture the reality of this thing.
Not at all.
These are not just cars with tinted windows.
Exactly the opposite. These are literal street-legal tanks.
Yeah.
To hit that price point, the engineering has to be military-grade. We're talking about ballistic glass thick enough to stop armor-piercing rounds. The chassis is reinforced with Kevlar.
Kevlar.
Yes, Kevlar. They have run-flat tires that can continue driving even if they're shot out or shredded by spike strips.
Wow.
They are designed, as the manufacturer notes, to prevent kidnappings, hijackings, and localized explosions.
Purchasing an asset designed to survive a war zone and using it to drive through Calabasas speaks volumes about the level of underlying paranoia. It's an admission that you view your daily life as a state of perpetual threat.
But I want to push back on the strategy here a bit.
Yeah.
If you drive to a restaurant in a $1.2 million tank-like vehicle that looks like it belongs in a combat convoy, does that actually keep you safer? Or does it just broadcast to the entire world that you are a massive, high-value target?
Oh, it definitely draws eyes.
Right. You're essentially daring the universe to notice you. drawing the exact kind of aggressive attention you're supposedly trying to avoid.
That is the core paradox of extreme fortification. The very tools you use to isolate yourself become massive neon signs pointing directly at you. And because the threat level feels so high, the protocols dictating how the security force operates have to be incredibly rigid. There is zero room for human nuance.
And the rigidity of those protocols is wild. Security has the absolute authority to deny entry to anyone, no matter how famous. There's a well-known incident where Kylie Jenner, at age 19, pulled up to the security gate of her own Calabasas neighborhood.
Let me guess, they didn't know who she was.
Exactly. The guard on duty didn't recognize her and asked, "Are you with Kylie Jenner?" She had actively convinced an armed guard that she was, in fact, the owner of the house just to get onto her own street.
While it sounds like a mildly amusing inconvenience, it perfectly illustrates how the system operates. The protocol supersedes the individual. The guard is trained not to rely on facial recognition from pop culture, but to adhere strictly to the clearance list.
We see that strict adherence being weaponized in personal family dynamics as well. Amid Kim's divorce from Kanye, she hired an entirely new security team with absolutely no prior connections to him. Their explicit primary directive was to ban Kanye from her property and prevent him from disrupting her life.
That is a huge shift.
It is. Security shifted from protecting her against strangers to managing an incredibly volatile, highly public family dispute.
When you use a tactical security force to enforce emotional boundaries with a former spouse, you have completely outsourced your interpersonal conflict resolution to armed professionals.
And the margin for error for the professionals taking these jobs is exactly zero. According to the reporting, Kanye fired a guard named Steve Stanulis in 2016 at the Waldorf Astoria right before the Met Gala.
What did he do?
The alleged reason. Kanye caught Stanulis simply trying to speak to Kim outside her hotel room door. Stanulis, a former NYPD officer who maintained he was happily married and just doing his job, was fired on the spot.
That level of paranoia requires absolute subservience. If a guard stepping slightly out of line or simply speaking to a principal without authorization results in instant termination, it creates an environment of total silence and strict compliance.
We saw an even more dramatic example of this zero-tolerance policy with Pascal Duvier. He was Kim's highly praised, very visible bodyguard. She even tweeted out, "My security is a G," after he physically tackled an aggressor who tried to grab her in Paris. But just days later, the infamous Paris robbery occurred. Kim was held at gunpoint in her apartment.
A horrifying situation.
Absolutely. Now, Pascal was actually guarding Courtney at a nightclub across town that night. He wasn't at the apartment because he was assigned elsewhere. Sources confirmed that Kim 100% did not blame him for what happened.
Yet, he was still terminated shortly after the incident.
He was completely let go. The family cleaned house because they decided to bring in an entirely new, overhauled team with completely different operational protocols, including advanced emergency evacuation procedures. It didn't matter that he was literally doing his job, protecting a different sister. If a catastrophic breach happens on your watch, even if you aren't in the room, your career with them is over.
If we pull all of these threads together, the spiked drink at Coachella, the Los Angeles holding cell, and this $400,000 a month tactical fortress, we see a fascinating psychological transformation. To escape the helplessness of those early events, they've essentially constructed a new, incredibly expensive kind of cage.
The moat they built is trapping them inside. In the county jail, Khloé was paralyzed by the loss of autonomy. At Coachella, she was locked in a bathroom, terrified of the unpredictable crowd on the other side of the door. So their solution was to engineer unpredictability out of their existence completely.
Precisely. Spontaneity is treated as a security risk. Every interaction is vetted by an advanced team. Every drive is conducted behind ballistic glass. They have achieved immense physical safety, but they've done it by placing themselves in a gilded, highly regulated holding cell of their own design.
Right.
And this raises a profound question for you to mull over. If you spend $500,000 every single month to isolate yourself from the unpredictability of the real world, if every person allowed to stand within 10 feet of you is a paid employee bound by an ironclad non-disclosure agreement, how do you ever really know who your genuine friends are?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is. If every interaction is financially transactional or legally bound, is the ultimate price of extreme fame, not the staggering cost of the security, but the total tragic loss of genuine human connection.
You've been listening to Starscope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.